West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Listen, Laura, I've been wanting to get your perspective on this. Can you sum up for our audience what the Trump team is arguing in their response to last night's blockbuster DOJ brief?
Well, one, to answer your question, no one thinks Donald Trump is actually writing a memoir, and that's why he has in possession at Mar-a-Lago documents that ought to have been returned a long time ago. But their argument is simply this. We don't trust you, Department of Justice, to have conducted an investigation that would honor whatever privilege claims we think we have. Whether they're good or not, we think, if you're Trump's team, that we have executive privilege claims and we have attorney-client privilege. Although you had a separate team go in and try to ensure those guardrails were up, we couldn't see those, we don't trust it, we want our own person. Their second argument, of course, is that they don't understand why there was any shock by the archives or anyone else that there were classified documents in the boxes that were at Mar-a-Lago, because of course they're classified, they're presidential records, which makes you scratch your head here, Don, right? Because the whole point of this whole exercise has been you don't have the right to have presidential records, but you're no longer the president of the United States. And so if you're on the one hand admitting that you had them and saying that classified documents were contained in them, you've made part of the Department of Justice's arguments to suggest why you're not supposed to have had any of it. But ultimately, this whole thing comes down to this particular motion they're doing right now says they want to have a special master. They don't trust the Department of Justice. And really, what they made the case for is why the archives and DOJ cannot trust them to have returned anything they're supposed to, all of what they're supposed to, or give some reason why they shouldn't have had to.
Nick, let's talk a little bit more about what Laura's saying. She's saying that Trump's lawyers are arguing that classified materials should have been expected to be found in those 15 boxes taken from Mar-a-Lago, claiming that it's just the nature of presidential records. Does that argument hold water, especially given the top secret documents at issue here?
No, of course not. I mean, this is stuff that is national security secrets. And I think what really caused the archives to send this over to DOJ for an investigation wasn't just the fact that they were classified documents, but that they were messed in with a lot of other irrelevant documents that just showed that the whole thing was one big mess. And so they were concerned as to what was happening with these documents, who was looking at them, and who had access to them. So it's much more beyond, and by the way, the papers that the Trump people put in just refer to them as sensitive documents. I mean, they try and downplay everything in this brief and don't even acknowledge that there are highly classified documents that are at issue with this search warrant.
Yeah, they do. Everything except they were hyperventilating. They had the vapors about expired passports and Time magazine. So, yeah, you're quite right with that, Nick. Brandon, it's good to have you back here, and especially because you specialize in mishandling the mishandling of classified documents. Trump team is expressing outrage over the photo. We'll put it up now. The photo that was included in the DOJ filing, calling it gratuitous. What do you think of that? What's your reaction?
So this is what happens when you collect evidence, in particular if you're collecting classified evidence. This isn't an indication of what it looked like. This is an indication trying to demonstrate this is the material that was seized from this particular location. And one of the things that jumps out is, I should say, these what are called cover sheets. When you have classified documents, they're not just marked top secret or secret, there's a cover sheet. And the point of that cover sheet is to scream at anyone in the room that this material is classified so that you don't trip over it, so that there aren't accidents. And so when you see these cover sheets and you learn that there were hundreds of classified documents, it indicates that it would have been difficult to miss this material.
Shouldn't all of this have gone either in a shredder or be discarded or whatever it is, however it is that they handle it? There is a process for this, and that process does not include, it being on a former president's, bedside table or desk or whatever, however it was stored. It should be secured and under government protection. Am I wrong about that?
Well, it's not, I would even take it a step beyond that, which is it's not about what should have happened on January 20th with respect to these documents, because I think the point was made earlier. If all of these classified documents, and I think we're at over 300 classified documents that were at Mar-a-Lago, if they were all returned to the archives in January, we wouldn't be having a discussion about a criminal investigation. And we wouldn't be having a discussion. It's not what happened to those documents on January 20th. People do make mistakes. Many cases involving the mishandling of classified information are ultimately not prosecuted. People do make mistakes. It's what happened after that. And I think that's sort of a key point here. That the bottom line is it's not that there were classified documents there. It's that when there was notice that there were these documents there, ultimately they remained.
Laura, what's not in here, right, is any mention of declassified documents or the response to the government saying that Trump moved documents and tried to obstruct the investigation. Why is that not in there?
Because there's not really likely a legitimate defense to those notions. They're trying to hone in and be very narrow in their focus in front of this particular judge. Remember, this is, just for the audience's clarification, this is not the same judge who signed off on the search warrant. They have to give a different judge the context, the comprehensive information to rule on things that they were asked about, which is the special masters. They're trying to focus on a particular aspect of it as, I think, a bit of not a distraction to be nefarious, but their strongest arguments that they have are in favor of why they believe a neutral figure in a case such as this of extraordinary public interest ought to check and make sure that every I was dotted and T was crossed. But I just want to underscore this point that you made and Brandon as well. We should not be here. Right. We should not be here because there should have been the cooperation from a former president to provide documents back to the National Archives. Yes, mistakes have been made. We most notably hear the analogy all the time raised about former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and her retention of documents on a private email server. Guess what the distinction here so far has been? That there was cooperation to provide documentation. The reason we're already here at the point in time we're talking about an execution of a search warrant where you've got the legal filing suggesting to them that, look, all you were supposed to do here was not have a criminal referral, but you should have gone back to the archives. That would have been standard back and forth. Well, that's not what has happened in the past. It's not what should have to happen at all when we're dealing with documents of this nature. We should never be here. We should never know about this. The story should have ended when the first 15 boxes were returned, and that should have been all of them.
Is this similar, Laura, when you're talking about the distinction? Is it like, is there a presiding judge and then a magistrate that sort of rules on things? Is that how this works? Is that what?
Yeah, well, there's different intermediate judges. There's a magistrate who rules on evidentiary things about whether search warrants should be executed. They normally don't hear trials. The trial judge is usually the federal district judge who will hear the case ultimately.
Okay. So, Nick, what about this idea that Trump had an expectation of privacy at his residence, which is a golf course that's open to members and where he was apparently keeping classified documents the government wanted back? He was keeping them in his desk.
Well, that's the whole point of the Fourth Amendment. I mean, there is an expectation of privacy, and there is the amendment, basically the Fourth Amendment, says that you're going to be secure in your home and your possessions, and any searches have to be reasonable. And so to have a reasonable search, the government had to come in, as they did here, and provide probable cause that there was evidence of a crime had been committed, and evidence of that crime existed at Mar-a-Lago. They certainly did that, and the proof is in the pudding and what they came up with and they took. I mean, what the papers that were filed today completely try and downplay the whole business about what occurred in June and then later in terms of turning over other documents and responding to a grand jury subpoena. They try and portray this as just the usual give and take when the archives gets involved with the president who's setting up the papers. And this was basically just giving security advice. I mean, that's how they portray what in effect is concealment in a false affidavit that was offered by Trump's own attorney, saying that they had done an adequate search and had looked everywhere for all the classified documents. That did not happen.
Brandon, before we get out of here, I have to ask you, what do you expect from the DOJ? What will they do next?
They're going to do what they've continued to do. In fact, really, the special master here, it's a bit of a distraction. The special master, at most, is going to potentially withhold some small amount of documents or delay it. Like, the investigation is ongoing, and what the Department of Justice, and there are sort of two threads. One is being led by the Justice Department and FBI, where they're determining what happened and why. They're determining why these classified documents were taken to Mar-a-Lago, why they weren't all returned to the archives, why they weren't provided when there was a subpoena, why there were representations made on June 3rd that ultimately turned out to be false. There's also what the intelligence community is doing, and it's not just to determine what potential risks there were to national security and how to mitigate those risks. They are doing a classification review. Are these documents actually still classified? That's relevant to potential charges. They're fingerprinting these documents. They're trying to determine, can they determine who accessed them? That is relevant to potential criminal charges. They're also building a timeline to understand why these documents in particular were in the possession of the president. And so they're going through all of that information. And they're also, if the investigation advances, what the Justice Department would be doing is determining, can any of these documents actually be shown to a jury? Can we use these in trial? So there's still a lot of work to be done.
It is Thursday, the 1st of September of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life, and indeed, it's getting pretty spicy out there, isn't it, Bernard? Very, very spicy. Okay, well, I think that Don Lemon and crew broke it down quite succinctly about what's really going on in the Trump filing. I should make note that this new lawyer that he has, Justy, is a former organized crime DOJ prosecutor. So just saying. I guess he's trying to think like a mobster. How would mobsters think? Well, how do mobsters think? Yeah, you blame the other side as being more of a mobster than we are. Is that what it is? I guess so. It also sounds like possibly Justy is unaware that Donald Trump doesn't pay. But I guess he doesn't have to, because Leonard Leo will pick up the tab. With the money, whoever gave Leonard Leo the money to hand out to, well, they call it Republican causes, but I think we might as well just call it fascist causes, because we're way past Republicanism now, aren't we? Yes, way past. I wouldn't even call it maggot. I'm just calling it fascist, because that's really what it is. Start getting the big money involved there with the industrialists. You can't get much more fascist than that. You might even call it Nazi. But people have a bone to pick. Oh, you can't call it Nazi. It's like saying AR-15 means assault rifle. Oh, really? I thought it meant Armalite. You stupid idiot. Okay, whatever. Okay, so Trump is bobbing and weaving, and he's got apparently a mob lawyer who used to be in the DOJ prosecuting mobsters. We're not the mobster, you are. Okay. We need a special master, a special Sharpie master is what they're looking for. So they can go in there and mark up the documents to say, hey, there's our evidence. Look, we were able to push this hurricane away from the panhandle. And that's the way it is. Is it? Okay, I don't want to live in a democracy like that, because that's not a democracy. Yeah, it's sort of like the whims of a crazy-ass fascist. Spoiled frat boy, rich boy. I hate these guys. I always have. I don't know why. It just seems sort of like it was genetically predisposed. Maybe hate's too strong of a word, because I don't really believe in hate. But, every now and then my guard gets let down. Feels good to hate sometimes, doesn't it? That's why we have to stop hating. And they make it so hard. So very, very hard. Okay. Well, since we got spicy spice going on, heading into the Labor Day weekend, will we be able to rest? Oh, no. Why don't we give a rundown about what we have in store for you here? Once again, why don't I just break all HIPAA regulations? Of course I'm not, because I'm not selling it to a third party. Okay. As far as we know. Anyway, visited with Mom a little bit yesterday, and she's still a little, shall we say, confused, and I don't know. Maybe she's not responding as quickly as we want her to on all fronts. She sounded really great when I spoke with her in the morning yesterday, early. And by the time I got there, she was sort of out of it again. And still trying to stabilize her blood pressure and, just things like that. And it's a bit, to me, that's a bit concerning. I guess they have a handle on it. The nurse that, they have several nurses that are there, because not every nurse can work 24 hours a day on end, though many try. Anyway, another nurse that was on their shift spoke with me at some length, just so that they could get a baseline on, like what was Mom's confusion before she came in here. Well, little things like she didn't quite remember it was August. So, you want people to know the month. And, Mom's certainly capable of that. Early on, she was able to tell everybody exactly what was going on with, they'd ask her, why are you here? Well, I'm getting a hip replacement. So, why do you keep asking me this? So the nurse had intimated or stated that Mom, got a little confused about why she was in the hospital, which is, part of the lingering effects of pain medication and all sorts of other stuff. So, we are working on it. I'll have, you get worried when it's your kin. It's hard to stay rational. Emotion gets involved in one's rational understanding of stuff. I've noticed my sister, who is in the medical business by being a registered nurse, has fallen into this terrible trap of that she is questioning every decision that a nurse or doctor is making. You got to give it up. You just got to have some faith, as they say. All right. I don't like to think that no matter what my field is, that I'm an expert, even in that field, when someone else is, doing their job. They're the expert now. Maybe. I don't know. I just don't like to second guess medical personnel too much on every, well, too much, yeah. Too much. I mean, you can sort of give a nod to it, but not every little thing. Why are you poking them on that vein? Why don't you put it on the other vein? Don't do that. Okay. Enough of all of that. Like I said, when it's your kin, you get really emotionally involved in it, and sometimes it's better to let a professional handle it. Okay, what's on our menu? As I intimated a bit earlier, here in the Bistro Cafe part of this salon, we know as West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Library of Congress launched an internal probe of the controversial remodel that will alter the ornate main reading room in its historical Thomas Jefferson Building. And we reported on that last April. Well, the controversial remodel proposal, now they're going to have an internal investigation about how the hell did that come in. National test scores plunged during the pandemic. So much for homeschooling, huh? And Texas Governor Greg Abbott looked Uvalde families in the eye and lied that raising the age to purchase weapons like those used to slaughter their kids would be unconstitutional. God, he's a ghoul. After the break, we move to the chef's table where a rapid deployment team of FBI cyber experts is headed to Montenegro to investigate a massive, coordinated attack on the tiny Balkan nation's government. And German prosecutors raided the office of JPMorgan Chase in Frankfurt as part of a broader tax evasion investigation. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link there across the page near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And you know what that means. Because if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and maybe send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, it would really help us pay our bills. And, it would really help. So thank you for doing that and considering doing so in the future. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so by going to @Netroots Radio. How simple is that? Tom takes care of it, and he made it simple. So there. You can follow me on Twitter by going to @JusticePutnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, and you can access that diary by going to the link provided at my Twitter feed there. Yes. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. And of course, the deep archive of the Netroots Radio Library for the past 11 plus years can be found at the Internet Archive at archive.org. Look for Netroots Radio. We're right there. Okay, this first offering right here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Washington Post by Peggy McGlone. The Inspector General at the Library of Congress is reviewing a whistleblower complaint that the library lacks the authority to advance a controversial proposal that will alter the ornate main reading room in its historical Thomas Jefferson Building. The library is proposing to remove, not enhance, not repair, not maintain, but remove the 16-foot tall tower portion of the reading room center desk and replace it with a window in the floor. What the library is calling an oculus. Oh, you get to see through it. That will offer a view of the room's decorative dome to visitors looking up from a new orientation gallery on the floor below. The proposal is part of a $60 million makeover of the library introduced in 2019. Who was president then, I wonder? That they say would modernize and improve the visitor experience by increasing public access, displaying more of the library's treasures, and adding a learning center and orientation gallery. Pre-pandemic, the library attracted about 1.8 million visitors a year. Special investigator Johnny Rivera interviewed Thomas Mann, the retired librarian who filed the complaint in April to halt the library's plan, and Mann confirmed that interview this week. The library's Office of the Inspector General did not respond to requests for comment because you know why. The interview came on the heels of the D.C. Preservation League adding the main reading room of the library's 1897 Beaux-Arts building to its most endangered places. In its listing, the DCPL described the proposal as ill-advised and found it would radically alter its original architecture in terms of its view, its function, and its spatial relationships. And the building was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1965, and I guess they're just trying to erase everything of the Great Society, aren't they? Brett Zonger, the library's chief of media relations, described the DCPL's most endangered placing listing as full of inaccuracies and hyperbole, and criticized the Washington Post's interest in it. It's all fake news. I wonder if he said that. We object to the limited focus on gymmed-up controversy here and allowing a disgruntled former employee to drive up misinformation through DCPL and define the library's functions today. Zonger wrote in an email, and everybody wonders how they got an accent out of that. Well, we try hard here, and we are able to accomplish it. The D.C. Preservation League encouraged the public to contact Congress to voice their opinions of the plan. More than 300 emails were sent as a result. The listing prompted the union, representing more than 1,350 library employees, to renew its opposition to a proposal that its leaders said would mutilate the national treasure. When we first encountered the proposed plan to remove the center desk in 2019, many staff members, including many within the Guild, assumed the architect of the Capitol would never approve this alteration because it so obviously disregards the ethics of historic preservation, as well as the specific laws they have voluntarily committed to uphold. The leaders of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local 2910, wrote on its website under the headline, "A National Treasure at Risk?" Principal Deputy Librarian of Congress Mark Sweeney said the larger project includes a 9,000 square foot orientation center to display more of the library's collection, glass doors offering views of the reading room and the stacks, and an education center. The design phase is expected to conclude within months, with construction starting next year. Wait, this sounds something like Melania would come up with. This sounds suspiciously like that tennis pavilion. Thank God a watchdog is looking into it. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays is also out of the Washington Post, but this time by Donna St. George. Test scores in elementary school math and reading plummeted to levels unseen for decades, according to the first nationally representative report comparing student achievement from just before the pandemic to performance 2 years later. Math scores dropped 7 points during that period, marking a first-ever decline, while reading scores slipped 5 points, producing the largest dip in 30 years on the National Assessment for Educational Progress, or NAEP, often called the nation's report card. The students who took the tests, given from January to March in 2020 and in 2022, were 9 years old and mostly in fourth grade. Those results are sobering, said Peggy G. Carr, commissioner of the National Center for Education Statistics, which administers the tests. It's clear that COVID-19 shocked American education and stunted the academic growth of this age group. No, it means that homeschooling doesn't work, apparently. Yeah, people could up their test scores if there was, competent teaching. This shows that without a robust public health, public health, of course, but public educational system, we're going to have these plummets, aren't we? Yes, we are. The fall-off, which she called historic, left little doubt about the pandemic's toll. Well, once again, I think the pandemic exposed that we need more public education, don't we? The average math score of 234 this year was comparable to the average score recorded in 1999, which I don't know. Okay. I will stop pontificating and get back to the article at hand. How long it might take to catch up is unclear and not likely to be understood until further test results are analyzed. Carr said the academic losses are part of the complex picture of pandemic schooling. Schools began to struggle in spring of 2020 as school buildings were shuttered nationally, and learning faltered during the last few months of the school year. Really? Then, for at least part of the next school year, millions of students learned remotely or under hybrid schedules that blended virtual and in-person classes. Last year, schools opened for in-person classes, but many scrambled repeatedly to manage COVID surges, quarantines, mask mandates, and staffing shortages. A number of educators called it the toughest time of their career. Weber of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Republican Governor Greg Abbott yesterday, Wednesday, pushed back on calls by Uvalde families for new gun control measures in Texas, saying that raising the minimum age to purchase weapons like the one used in the Robb Elementary School massacre would be unconstitutional. The 18-year-old gunman who killed 19 children and 2 teachers in a 4th-grade classroom on May 24th had legally purchased the AR-15 style rifle that investigators say fired more than 140 rounds inside the school. In the wake of the tragedy, some Uvalde parents are pressuring lawmakers to raise the minimum age in Texas to purchase similar weapons to 21 years old. Abbott, who is up for re-election in November and has expanded gun access after previous mass shootings in Texas, said court decisions in recent months tie the hands of any effort to raise age restrictions for firearms. It is clear that the gun control law that they are seeking in Uvalde, as much as they may want it, it has already been ruled to be unconstitutional, Abbott told reporters at a campaign event near Dallas. One law scholar challenged Abbott's assertion, saying the issue is not yet settled, and the group March for Our Lives criticized Abbott's comments as patently untrue. I like to call it a lie. A handful of states, including Florida, Hawaii, Illinois, Vermont, and Washington, require buyers to be at least 21 instead of 18 to purchase some types of long rifles. Democrat Beto O'Rourke, who is running against Abbott and has made stronger gun control measures a centerpiece of his underdog campaign, responded by reiterating a pledge to raise the age to 21 if elected. Thanks to the leadership of the families in Uvalde, we are going to do it, O'Rourke tweeted. Last week, a federal judge in Texas struck down one of Texas's few remaining firearm restrictions, finding a law that barred adults under the age of 21 from carrying a handgun was unconstitutional. The law had been defended in court by the Office of Republican Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, which has not filed an appeal since the ruling came down. In May, a federal appeals court in California ruled that a state ban on the sale of semi-automatic weapons to adults under 21 was unconstitutional. The ruling encouraged gun rights group that other age-based gun bans would be overturned in courts. Sanford Levison, a professor at the University of Texas at the Austin School of Law, said Abbott spoke with too much certainty about lower age limits being unconstitutional. There's no good reason to say that with confidence, he said. All you can say is some people think it is, some people think it isn't. But the Supreme Court has certainly not addressed the issue. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Ashley Papp. It's summertime in New York City. Birds are chirping, insects are scurrying, and everything feels alive. While recent heat waves have pushed a lot of us indoors to the respite of air conditioning, the critters of this city were left to fend for themselves.
Many would be surprised that they're going to be doing the same exact things that most humans are doing. They're not going to be pushing it. They're going to be taking their time and seeking those, shadier spots of the park.
That's Sunny Correo, an environmental scientist.
I work with New York City Parks Department as part of our wildlife unit, a small but mighty team that focuses on how New Yorkers can coexist with wildlife in an urban environment.
From the birds and squirrels to raccoons and even the turtles, here's how urban wildlife is responding as the mercury rises. Let's start with the birds.
Obviously, there are a lot of different species of birds that can be found all across the city, from your pigeons to your larger birds of prey. And what's interesting about birds is they don't sweat through their skin like humans and other mammals do.
Instead, birds lose heat through exposed skin, which, if you think about the last time you saw a bird in Prospect Park, there really isn't much exposed aside from their feet, legs, and beak. Sometimes, when temps really spike, birds can pant, kind of like a dog, to get rid of their excess heat. Ultimately, these tactics help, but usually aren't enough during a heat wave. So
they'll find everything from a little puddle from a recent rainstorm, or maybe the hydrants that are open down the street, to fountains, and even the spray showers in our playgrounds across the city. You can find birds that will be seeking refuge in the water to kind of help cool off.
Aquatic turtles can almost always be found near the ponds and lakes of our urban sprawl. On a normal day, you might spot a small stack of turtles near the water. This is because they're ectotherms, meaning their bodies rely on external things for heat. Piling on top of one another or on a warm rock surface helps to keep the turtle's core body at a healthy temp. When things get too hot, like during NYC's recent heat wave, they change their behavior a bit. Instead, they head into the water and spread out.
Basically, they're hanging out at the pool all day. They're going to be floating at the very surface of the water so that they can still get some of the sun, but any extra heat that might be a little dangerous to their body temperature, to their core temperature, they will be able to dissipate into the water.
For fur-covered critters like squirrels, cooling off in the pond or the playground water park isn't an option. When the heat rises in the city, these little mammals can be seen doing a funny posture that's known as splooting.
Basically, that means they're just spreading out on a surface on their stomach with their forelimbs forward and their hind legs backwards, just kind of splat on the ground.
That increased skin to surface area helps squirrels dissipate more heat to the ground, which, under a shady tree in Central Park, is way cooler than the ambient air. Raccoons, on the other hand, have developed a slightly different tactic. They head to parts of the park that have kind of natural air conditioning.
I certainly know of areas that are cooler than others. They kind of have these small microclimates to them. I know where the shady benches are.
In our most recent heat wave, Correo noticed raccoons and humans enjoying the shade of a wooded gazebo that's in one of the cooler areas of Central Park. While the humans sought refuge on the benches below, the raccoons were softly snoozing on the lush rooftop above. Seth Magley is an urban ecologist based in Chicago. In 2021, he started building a network of fellow urban critter enthusiasts from around the world. Collectively, they're called the Urban Wildlife Information Network. They're working to collect information about critters in a similar way so that it can be compared across different cities.
Ultimately, it's all with the goal of trying to create more wildlife inclusive cities. We are sort of also united by our desire to make cities part of the solution to the biodiversity crisis and to help reduce human-wildlife conflict and increase human-wildlife coexistence in all of the massively urbanizing areas around the world.
In Chicago, Magley and his team have been watching their city's wildlife for about 10 years. Altogether, they have over 100 camera traps set up across different types of urban environments, from the downtown loop and city parks to nature preserves and suburb golf courses. And during times of extreme heat,
we do definitely seem to see reduced movement. It seems like when it gets very hot, animals just sort of hunker down where they are. It's probably so energetically difficult to move around when it's so hot.
Although this coping mechanism works for a short-term spike in temp, it's not ideal over a longer period because it means less time to search for food or a new mate. And as Magley and his network of urban researchers look toward the future in climate change projections, they anticipate bigger shifts. Temps everywhere are projected to warm. So wildlife in urban settings and beyond will likely have to shift their normal territories a bit further north to where it feels more comfortable to what they're already used to.
We don't have armadillos in Chicago, but we have them in the southern part of the state, and they seem to be migrating north. And so I'm starting to have to take questions about what are we going to do if there's armadillos in Chicago, right? Which is unimaginable, except on a planet that is warming. There's a million other questions, I think, like that. As a lot of these species, at least in this hemisphere, make these kind of northward shifts, they're going to come into contact with cities in places we didn't expect.
Only time will tell how our urban wildlife reacts to these longer-term shifts in temperature. For now, it sounds like urban critters, so long as they're healthy, are totally capable of handling a few days of extreme heat here and there. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Ashley Papp.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Corporate acolytes and right-wing moralists constantly preach to laboring stiffs about the uplifting dignity of work. Of course, that's dignity as defined and controlled by corporate elites, not by workers, and the reward for it frequently includes on-the-job injuries and death. Not that CEOs and well-heeled investors intend to sicken, maim, and kill thousands of laborers every year, but they certainly do put them in positions that assure such unhappy results. For example, they demand that farm workers go sunrise to sunset picking crops in California's 105-degree desert heat, and that construction crews toil in the muggy dog days of Florida summers, tarring condo roofs. Low-paid, powerless workers die, but no one in the corporate hierarchy did the deed, right? Heat was the killer. But wait, not only are aloof, air-cool bosses the ones who knowingly subject subordinates to deadly heat, but they're also the ones who hire squads of lobbyists and lawyers to kill simple, inexpensive rules to stop these deaths. Such rules as requiring ample water at work sites, ensuring paid rest breaks in cool spaces, training on-site managers and employees to detect and react to signs of heat stress, and imposing serious punishments for violators. Such sensible steps have repeatedly been proposed as official workplace policy for at least the last 50 years. But intense industry lobbying has killed the adoption of all attempts to prevent what amounts to workplace murder by corporate profiteers. Instead, the U.S. government pretends to protect workers by printing posters admonishing employees to beware of heat, basically telling them goodbye and good luck. This is Jim Hightower saying, but at last a real proposal has been put on the table by more than 110 grassroots groups. See it and join it by contacting Public Citizen, citizen.org. Howdy-ho, folks. Thanks for tuning in and sharing my weekly commentaries. Also, please join me for a live web show I host every other Tuesday, the Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew Cafe. You can join the action live online as I chat with grassroots leaders and progressive sparklies from around the country. Go to hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew to find out about upcoming guests and watch past episodes. That's hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew.
Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org Vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1859. That was the day the first Pullman sleeping car made an overnight trip. The first Pullman sleeper was a renovated day coach. That first trip was made on the Chicago and Alton Railroad between Bloomington, Illinois and Chicago. Pullman continued to improve his sleeping cars to make long-distance train travel more comfortable and luxurious. Inspired by company towns in Essen, Germany and Saltier, England, Pullman bought land south of Chicago to build his company town. He named his new town Pullman and moved all of his manufacturing operations there. There were other sleeping cars at that time, but George Pullman refined the sleeping car and built a monopoly. As for his company town, initially it seemed to be a great success. Visitors to Chicago flocked to Pullman to view the model town. But then there was a severe economic depression in 1893. This caused Pullman to lower the wages of his employees. However, Pullman did not also lower the rents he charged to live in the company town. Prices of goods for sale in the town were not lowered either. Disgruntled workers went on strike. Many of the strikers joined the American Railway Union, started by Eugene V. Debs. This union organized a boycott, and railroad workers across the country refused to service any train with a Pullman car. The U.S. Attorney General issued an injunction demanding that the strikers cease in their activities or face being fired. Eventually, President Cleveland sent in federal troops to end the boycott. As a result, 30 workers were killed across the nation. Pullman died a few years later, and today, his Pullman Palace car that transformed the transportation industry is a relic of history. But his legacy of slashing wages lives on. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 59 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of about 100 to 104. How dare they? And that's about nearly the same as yesterday. It was quite, ugly smoke in the air because we are still under an active air advisory and plentiful sunshine. Visibility will once again be reduced by smoke. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies, they say, overnight, with lows in the low 60s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10, and then sunny skies tomorrow, highs in the upper 90s, winds out of the west-northwest at a windier clip of 10 to 15 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have been updated, and we have increased both confirmed cases and deceased. Confirmed cases now stand at 501,005 people infected by COVID-19, and our deceased have increased by 7 and stand at 577. Excuse me. That is rather stunning in our little state of Oregon. Well, they say that grass pollen is rated as none outside the window at the moment because the air quality index is in the moderate range of 80 parts per million because of that smoke, and the daytime UV index is high at level 7. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles. And relative humidity is 77%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 73 and partly cloudy. Paris is 82 and fair. Rome is 74 and fair. Kyiv is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. Kabul is 70 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 84 and fair. Tokyo is 76 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 56 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 and partly cloudy. And New York is 80 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Frederick Millich of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A rapid deployment team of FBI cyber experts is heading to Montenegro to investigate a massive coordinated attack on the tiny Balkan nation's government and its services, the country's Minister of Internal Affairs announced. The announcement came as the government's main websites, including the Ministries of Defense, Finance, and Interior, remained unreachable. Officials said they were offline for security reasons. A cyber criminal extortion gang claimed responsibility for at least part of the attack, infecting a parliamentary office with ransomware known as Cuba, which the cybersecurity firm Profero has found to include Russian speakers. Russian-speaking cyber criminals generally operate without Kremlin interference, as long as they don't target friendly nations.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. German prosecutors have raided the office of JPMorgan Chase and Company in Frankfurt as part of a broader tax investigation targeting numerous banks in Germany and beyond. Cologne prosecutors said that dozens of investigators began searching the offices on Tuesday of a Frankfurt-based financial institution and several auditing and tax firms. The raids, which also targeted private apartments of 4 suspects, were linked to an investigation into so-called Cum-Ex share transactions and related tax evasion practices that are said to have cost the German government billions of euros. In a statement, J.P. Morgan confirmed that its Frankfurt offices were visited this week. The offices of several rival institutions have already been searched by German authorities. Hundreds of bankers allegedly were involved in a Cookbook scheme that saw participants claim reimbursement for taxes they had not paid. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.